The first thing they noticed was the mail. Not the usual stack, not bills, not pension statements, not catalogs. Just one envelope. Cream-colored. Heavy paper. Government seal. From the Office of Veterans Administration. Mr. William Will Jefferson. Status, reclassification, discharge review. His wife, Alma, held it in her hand like it was ticking. Will stood at the sink, drying a chipped coffee cup. "Open it," he said. She did. And then the words came, like acid on her tongue. "Your discharge classification has been revised retroactively to dishonorable due to unresolved behavioral infractions recorded in 1971. Will froze. Alma dropped into the kitchen chair like her bones gave out. "This has to be a mistake," she said. But Will knew better. Will Jefferson had been a soldier. Vietnam, 1969. Medals didn't matter now. Neither did wounds. Neither did the memory of that rainy night in Khe Sanh when he carried 2 men across enemy lines with a bullet in his hip. He'd been honorably discharged in 1972. Then spent 50 years helping other veterans. Feeding homeless vets. Counseling the broken ones. Speaking at schools. And now, at 76, they had decided to rewrite his story. They said they'd found a file. One he'd never seen. One that claimed he'd incited insubordination. That he'd been violent toward a superior officer. They said he didn't deserve the pension he'd been receiving for 5 decades. Didn't deserve his burial rights. Didn't deserve to be called a veteran at all. Will drove to the VA office the next morning. He wore his old army jacket, the fabric faded, the patch nearly threadbare. The young woman behind the glass didn't even look up when he approached. "Name?" she asked. "Jefferson. William. 1st Battalion, 506th Infantry." She typed. Blinked. Then frowned. "Your file's been flagged. You'll need to speak to Records Appeals." He nodded. "I'll wait." "No," she said. "You'll need an appointment. Current wait time is 39 days. His jaw tightened. "I bled in a jungle for this country. I think I can wait 39 minutes. She didn't flinch. Next. That night, Will sat in his study staring at a manila folder. Inside, the new file. It had been emailed to him from an anonymous address just before sunset. No message. Just a PDF. He opened it. He scanned the forms. Then stopped cold. The signature. His name, scrawled in black ink at the bottom of a behavioral incident report. It wasn't his handwriting. And the officer named in the complaint? Lieutenant Carlton Rhodes. Will hadn't seen that name in decades. Because Rhodes had died in country. Will had carried his body to the medevac chopper himself. And now, 50 years later, someone had decided Rhodes had filed a complaint against him. Will stared at the screen. They had forged a dead man's words. He made one call. To Clarence Morris, former JAG attorney, now retired and still sharper than a razor. Clarence listened quietly, then said, "Someone's cooking something deep. Either they want your benefits, or they want your silence." Will asked, "Why now?" Clarence didn't pause. "Because people like you, black veterans with dignity and a voice, are inconvenient in election years." The next morning, a knock at Will's door. A young woman stood on the porch. Brown skin. Smart eyes. Notepad in hand. "Mr. Jefferson?" He nodded. "My name's Lena Reed. I'm a freelance journalist. I think they're trying to erase you." She held up her phone. On it, a photo. His name on a redacted government list titled, "Reassessment Targets, High-Risk Veterans." And below it, "Public exposure, controlled. Prefer nonviolent resolution." The next morning, Will opened the garage. It was a habit, almost reflex. He'd kept everything there. Not just tools and paint cans, but history. Real history. Boxes of photos from Vietnam. Letters. Field journals. Metal records. He found the one he wanted, a rusted metal case labeled KHE San. Inside, a photo. Black and white. For young men grinning in soaked fatigues. Will, front and center. And next to him, Lieutenant Carlton Rhodes. The dead man who supposedly accused him of insubordination. He turned the photo over. Rhodes had written on the back in fading pen. To Jefferson, the best damn soldier I ever had. I owe you my life, Cr. Will stared at it for a long time. And then he called Lena. Lena Reed arrived with her laptop and an energy that didn't match the quiet solemnity of Will's home. She spread files across his kitchen table. I dug into the list, she said. You're not alone. She pulled up a spreadsheet. 16 other veterans. All black. All honorably discharged in the 60s or 70s. All recently reclassified as dishonorable or under review. Will frowned. Any white names on that list? Not a single one. Then she leaned in. There's a pattern. All 16 gave testimony or led protests against military policy in the last 20 years. She tapped one row. Jerome Wallace organized the 2003 VA walkout in Philly. Another. Lou Harris spoke at the 2014 Senate hearing on PTSD neglect. She looked up. You testified in '09. You remember what you said? Will did. He remembered it like it was yesterday. He had stood in front of Congress and told them, "This country loves its wars. But it forgets its warriors. Especially the ones who look like me." Apparently, someone hadn't forgotten. That night, Will opened his old footlocker. Inside, a journal. Not typed. Not printed. Handwritten. Dated. With his own notes from the field. He flipped to July 1971. The week Lieutenant Rhodes had supposedly filed a report. Will read. And there it was. July 18th, Rhodes killed in mortar fire. I carried him 200 yards under fire. Watched his last breath. Will sat back, breathing slowly. Dead men don't file complaints. At 3:11 a.m., he woke to the sound of glass breaking. He moved like he was 30 again, barefoot down the hall, baseball bat in hand. He didn't find a burglar. He found his garage door hanging open. And his metal footlocker, the one with the journal, missing. The rest of the garage untouched. Only that. He stood there in the dark, heart pounding, memories rushing like bullets. They hadn't come to steal. They had come to erase. The police arrived 40 minutes later. Took the report. Said all the right things. But Will could see it in their faces. You sure you didn't misplace it, sir? He nodded slowly. That's what they said when they lost my records in '74. The officer smiled awkwardly. Will didn't. At sunrise, Lena showed him a clip on her phone. It was a grainy video. A black SUV pulling away from the alley behind his house at 3:09 a.m. Unmarked plates. Government issue. He looked at her. You ready to see where this goes? She didn't hesitate. I'm ready to show people what they're not supposed to see. Later that day, Will met with Clarence Morris again. The old JAG lawyer was sitting in a folding chair on his porch, bourbon in one hand, notebook in the other. They're scared, Clarence said. The whole damn system's scared. Of what? Will asked. Clarence grunted. Of truth with a pulse. Of a black man who won't sit down just because he's tired. He pulled out an envelope. I filed a Freedom of Information request under my name. 2 hours ago, I got this. Inside, a classified memo. Stamped, VA Project Dagger/Subject, Veterans Influence Risk Index. It listed names. Scores. Color-coded risk bands. Will's name was marked in red. High risk for ideological disruption, it read. Clarence whistled. "They've been categorizing you not by what you did in the war, but by what you said after." That night, Lena uploaded her first article. The veterans they tried to erase, featuring Will's testimony, his journal photos, the surveillance SUV, and the missing file. It spread like wildfire. But it also triggered something darker. 3 of the other veterans on the list, Wallace, Harris, and Cole, received warning letters the next morning. Each was told that their pension was being suspended pending further review. The gloves were off. And Will knew what was next. The sun was just beginning to crest the horizon when Lena's phone rang. "Block number." She hesitated, then answered. "This is Lena Reed." A voice, cold, clipped, emotionless. "Take the article down. Or you won't write again." She froze. "Who is this?" Click. The line went dead. Lena stared at the phone. Then glanced out her apartment window. A white van was idling across the street. She drove straight to Will's house. He met her at the door with 2 mugs of coffee and a loaded .38 on his hip. "They called you, didn't they?" he asked. She nodded. "Block number." "They did the same thing to Lou Harris last year," he said. "Right before he had his accident." "You think they'll go that far?" Will didn't blink. "I think they already have." Meanwhile, in a quiet retirement home in Virginia, a man named Colonel Avery Darnell opened his laptop. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from what he was about to do. He clicked an encrypted link sent to him by a former colleague who whispered the words. "They're after Jefferson." Darnell had known Will since the jungle. He'd been his commanding officer. And he knew one thing for certain. If Jefferson says someone forged Rhodes' file, someone did. He opened a folder labeled Project Dagger. Inside, the original list of flagged veterans. He scrolled down. Jefferson. Wallace. Harris. Cole. Then he saw a new name. His own. Colonel Avery Darnell, potential breach risk. He sat back, his pulse pounding. They were already watching him. That evening, Lena and Will visited the one place Will had avoided for 40 years, the VA Archives Division. They weren't there for a meeting. They were there to find the original discharge file, the real one, before it vanished too. Lena had a friend on the inside, Jacob Monroe, a junior clerk whose father had served under Will. They met in the parking lot under cover of darkness. Jacob handed them a keycard and a manila folder. "I couldn't make copies. But this will get you in. Row 73, box 241B. Will gripped the keycard tight. "You just stuck your neck out for me, son." Jacob nodded. "It's already out. Might as well do something with it." Inside the archive, the air was thick with dust and forgotten names. They found the box, cardboard, brittle at the edges. Inside, folders from Jefferson's division. Lena pulled one labeled Disciplinary Actions, 1971. It was empty. But beneath it, stuck to the box floor with a rusted paperclip, was a single form. Recommendation for Honor Commendation, Jefferson, William. July 23, 1971. It was signed by Lieutenant Carlton Rhodes, in the exact same handwriting as the back of the photo Will had kept for decades. Proof. Not just that the forged complaint was false, but that Rhodes had intended to recommend him for a medal. Will's hands trembled as he read. "They tried to bury me under lies," he whispered. "But this is the shovel." The next day, Will attended the Veterans Memorial Ceremony at the state capitol. He hadn't been in years. But this time, he brought the original file, laminated, stamped, authenticated by a court clerk that morning. He wore his medals again. And as the names of the fallen were read, Will took the stage. The crowd, mostly older men and women, watched him with quiet reverence. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I stand here not because I want recognition, but because I want truth. I fought under this flag, bled for it, lost brothers under it. And this year, that flag tried to erase me. He held up the document. But a flag is only as honest as the people who guard it. And someone in this country forgot that honor isn't paperwork. It's what you do when no one's watching. The crowd was silent. Then a voice called from the back. You tell it, Will. Another, we believe you. And then something strange happened. A man emerged from the crowd. Older, with a cane. Silver hair. Tall. Colonel Avery Darnell. He took the microphone from Will's hand and said, I was his commanding officer. And I confirm, this man was never anything but honorable. The lie was never his. It was ours. The media caught fire. Headlines that night. Decorated Colonel confirms VA fraud. Black veterans' records forged in Project Dagger scandal. VA on fire, Senate demands investigation. But not everyone was celebrating. That night, Will's house was broken into again. Nothing taken. Except the flag from his father's coffin, folded in a triangle above the mantel. No message. Just that space. That empty space. Like a scar. The flag was gone. The one from Will's father's casket, folded with military precision after the funeral in 1945, taken without a trace. It wasn't a robbery. It was a message. And Will understood it clearly. We'll take what you love if you don't shut up. But he didn't back down. He sat on his front porch that morning, in his old army jacket, the empty mantle behind him like a wound. A camera crew from PBS was setting up for a follow-up interview. I used to think they'd come for me with lawyers, Will said quietly. I didn't know they'd come for ghosts. Meanwhile, in D.C., a congressional hearing was underway. The room wasn't large, a basement-level chamber with too many flags and not enough light. But the names on the list being read aloud were loud enough to shake the walls. William Jefferson. Jerome Wallace. Lou Harris. Amanda Cole. Julius Freeman. Each name had a file. Each file had redactions, seals, stamps. Each one bore the logo of the now infamous VA operation. Project Dagger. At the center of the table sat a former VA analyst named Derek Quinlan, 42, pale, sweating, subpoenaed and shielded by whistleblower protections. He raised his right hand and took the oath. And then he spoke. This was never about safety. It was about control. We were told to flag veterans who used their platforms to challenge the VA publicly. Especially if they were black and had public sympathy. He pulled a document from his folder. A memo dated 2017. Jefferson is a high-impact target. Discredit through discharge reclassification. Prioritize indirect silencing, benefits leverage preferred. The room gasped. The chairwoman leaned in. Did you alter records? No, Quinlan said. But I watched others do it. And I stayed quiet. Why are you speaking now? He looked at the camera broadcasting live. Because I saw what they did to Maya's grandfather. The nation had watched that story, no bed for her. And now they knew it was part of something far worse. That night, Will got another knock at his door. Not the police. Not media. A woman. Early 50s. Polished. Calm. She handed him a sealed folder with a polite smile. I represent the Office of Veteran Affairs Special Resolution Team. Will said nothing. Inside, a settlement offer. All charges dropped. Honor fully restored. Lifetime benefits reinstated. Public recognition ceremony offered. But beneath it, in smaller type. In exchange, Mr. Jefferson agrees to make no further public statements regarding Project Dagger or the VA's administrative conduct. No interviews. No litigation. No testimony. It was a trade. Justice, in exchange for silence. Lena showed up 20 minutes later. Will handed her the document. She didn't speak. Just stared at the page like it stank. They're trying to buy your dignity, she finally said. No, Will replied. They're trying to buy the country's memory. He turned and stared at the empty mantle where the flag once sat. I already lost that flag. I won't lose the truth. The next morning, Will walked into the WFX National News studio for a live broadcast. The anchor tried to play it neutral. Mr. Jefferson, you've been offered full reinstatement. Most people would take that and walk away. Why refuse? Will looked into the camera. Because he wasn't talking to the anchor. He was talking to America. You ever wonder why people call us the greatest generation? It's not because we fought in a war. It's because we came home and tried to build something better. He held up the forged document, the one they claimed was his. This is the lie they wanted me to sign my name to. So that they wouldn't look bad. So that their systems could keep rolling, undisturbed, while my grandkids read a textbook that calls me a fraud. He folded the paper in half. Then slowly tore it down the middle. If you take their silence, he said, you give them your story. And I didn't survive the jungle, the riots, the policy boards, and 4 decades of lies, to die erased. The clip aired that night. By morning, it had 30 million views. And among those watching was a curator at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. She made one call. 2 weeks later, Will stood in Washington, D.C. in front of a brand new exhibit under soft golden light. Voices they tried to silence, the forgotten black veterans. Behind glass, his original metal commendation. Beside it, a copy of the forged report. And above both, a small bronze plaque. William Jefferson, 1946. They tried to erase him. But he left his name carved in truth. And beneath the case, folded precisely, was his father's flag. Recovered. Donated anonymously. Will didn't ask who returned it. He just stood in silence for a moment. Then saluted. 3 months passed. The wind had changed. Not just in Washington, but across the country. For the first time in decades, the Department of Veterans Affairs issued a public apology, one that didn't hide behind legalese or regrettable misunderstandings. It was printed on the front page of USA Today, broadcast on C-SPAN, and sent to the homes of every surviving veteran listed under Project Dagger. It read, to those whose voices were ignored, whose records were altered, whose honor was compromised, we failed you. This failure was not a clerical mistake. It was an act of silence imposed upon truth. We see you now. But Will Jefferson didn't smile when he read it. He didn't cheer. He just folded the paper and said, it's about damn time. The apology wasn't the end. Congress moved quickly, unanimously, for once, to pass the Veterans Record Integrity Act, known unofficially as Jefferson's Law. It mandated 2 things. Every veteran had the right to request an independent review of their discharge and service record with an outside, bipartisan civilian board. Any alteration to military records must be co-signed by a living officer or next of kin witness and logged in a publicly accessible archive. It was simple. And it was permanent. Will returned to Atlanta and stepped back into quiet. No parades. No headlines. But the flag was back on the mantle. And beside it now, in a wooden frame, hung something new. A letter. Handwritten. A little stained. Stamped 1971. Found in a warehouse in Da Nang during the restoration of U.S. military archives. It was addressed to whom it may concern. Sergeant William Jefferson. Written by Lieutenant Carlton Rhodes, dated 1 week before his death. Will opened it with shaking hands. He read slowly. If this makes it home before I do, let them know this man saved my life. Twice. Once in a firefight. Once when I nearly lost my head to fear. I owe him more than I can ever repay. He doesn't follow orders. He follows justice. That's the kind of soldier I want leading when the world's gone to hell. Whatever comes after this war, give him his name. He earned it. Lieutenant C. Rhodes. We'll read it 3 times. then placed it on the mantel, next to the flag, next to a photo of Maya, smiling in her purple nurse scrubs. Lena Reed won a Peabody Award for her reporting. But when she got the call, she didn't celebrate. She just drove back to Will's house and handed him the plaque. "It's yours," she said. "You told the story." Will shook his head. "I just refused to let them finish it." In the fall, a school in Macon, Georgia, changed its name. What was once Jefferson High School, named for the wrong Jefferson, became William Jefferson Academy for Service and Justice. Will didn't attend the ribbon cutting. He just watched it on TV, hand resting on the frame of Rhodes's letter. And one morning, Maya, now 12, a little taller, a little stronger, knocked on his door with a backpack and a serious face. "I have a school project," she said. "They want us to write a report about an American hero." He smiled. "Need help picking one?" She shook her head. "Nope," she said. "I'm writing about you." He sat down beside her at the table, pulled out an old pen, and said, "Then let's write it right."